All right. Welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we'll be doing a kind of monochromatic watercolor painting. If this is your first time here, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. Just to give you all a heads up, this is filmed live on Twitch. So I usually take about 5 minutes to get things started in these videos and set up the palette and talk about what we're going to do. So if you're not into that whole part, feel free to jump ahead about 5 minutes and we'll get started with the painting. If you don't feel like doing that, we'll talk about the palette, the paper, and our setup and the plan that we have to go with. So whenever I live stream, I have a Kindle, one of those cheap Kindles, off on the side for me to watch the channel and see what's going on and how everything looks. That looks good. We're filming right there. Let's get our palette set up and our paper wet. So with this, I take a large hake brush and I saturate a quarter sheet, an 11 by 15 piece of Stonehenge aqua, and the Kindle always gives me trouble. It always says that it always has a hard time connecting to the live feed, but we should be live. Now, saturating, soaking this will allow the paper to stretch and allow me to paint wet and wet. It's Stonehenge Aqua, which is 100% cotton and is 140 pound paper. Okay. Actually, the last time I watercolored and used this palette, I actually used this combination of colors that we're going to talk about. Now, what had happened was, I'm down in Louisiana and I wanted to get one last painting tutorial, painting video in before Hurricane Laura hit. And mid-painting, the power went out. It was one of the outer bands from the storm and regained power shortly after, but it ruined the live stream and I was painting in flickering light. Then later on that night, the storm hit, so that was an outer band, and we lost power for about 36 hours, which down here in Louisiana in the summer heat was just miserable. That second night we caved in and we drove out to our friend's house and stayed out by them overnight. It was just so hot. And now everything's back to normal at our house and in the town that we're in. But unfortunately, some outlying areas still having trouble with power. And people that are out at Lake Charles and Cameron Parish and all that, Calcasieu Parish, might be out with power for a really long time, unfortunately. So, anywho, the last time I watercolored was before that storm hit, and that's the story. So, with this, we're going to do a wet and wet landscape painting. I'm going to utilize a color combination of sap green and Venetian red. Mixing those two together are going to get me kind of a brown color with hints of green, hints of red in it. And then to that palette, I may add Payne's Gray, Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue to kind of push the green in different directions to give me a little bit more darks. We may even pull out some white gouache or some black wash, or maybe some watercolor lunar black. We'll see. It's just kind of a good stress relieving painting style. Alright, so our paper's soaked. You saw I started flattening it earlier. Now we're going to jump into it. Now, with this, you're welcome to follow along with any painting tutorial that I do. And if anybody ever wants to buy it from you, feel free to sell it. I want you guys to have money for art supplies. You know, art supplies are expensive. And if you'd like, down below, I have links to my Patreon if you'd like to support me on that. I also have, PayPal link if you'd like to ever send anything my way. And if not, it's totally fine. No hard feelings. I just love for you guys to like and subscribe. Beyond that, I also have the Etsy account, which sometimes I forget about, but I forget to mention. But today, somebody was kind enough to make a purchase off of there, so I'll be shipping out that painting tomorrow, so that's really exciting. Now, with this, we'll do an imaginary scene, and we'll utilize the wet and wet. And I mentioned that you can follow along with these tutorials, though they're not going to be exactly the same just because of the sheer variation that could take place due to the wet and wet. This is a color combination that I learned from the tonalist, and there's two modern tonalists that utilize it and have videos out, Stuart Davies and Dennis Sheehan, and they paint in oil paint, and we'll use kind of a color combination like this, and I've adapted it to watercolor. It's a very fun adaptation. It's kind of just a wipe in and allow images to start taking place. Here we're going to have our water, it looks like. Now we'll start building up a background. Now, with this, I use the hake brush. You can use probably a flat brush, square brush as well. Let me turn off the sound of my phone so we're not getting notification sounds. I apologize for that. There we go. Where was I? Okay. So, totally lost the train of thought with this one. I apologize for that. Now, here with the wet and wet, it really helps you explore tonal values and lets you work with kind of the aerial perspective. As you recede into the picture plane, things are going to get lighter, things are going to get bluer usually. We're not really working with a blue here, we're doing kind of a monochromatic bluish purple, but I'm getting it lighter to get a distant effect, and then I'm going to layer over more concentrated values. We're going to work our way forward. And the wet and wet will have a diffusion, so even though I have a little bit of harsh edges right here to begin with, they're going to soften up quite a bit. Now heads up, I do feel like this technique uses a lot of paint, and I'm not sure why. I'm using Da Vinci brand for these two colors, so it's a quality brand, but for some reason a lot of paint winds up getting used. You can also do this with other complementary color pairs. You could probably even just take burnt umber and work with it with that. But if you do just burnt umber, you won't get that green effect that's taking place. other color combinations you can use. Quinacridone rose with phthalo green. A good add-on to that is a burnt umber, which kind of neutralizes and gives you a more natural green. And it also mixes a beautiful, with the red, it mixes a color that for me resembles brown matter. So that's another palette you can use with this. In fact, I have videos utilizing that on YouTube. So, scroll around, check it out. One thing that definitely needs to be seen, making sure this paper towel doesn't have any oil on it. I was just oil painting before. I was working with Galkid liquid and doing glazes on top of some paintings that I have that I'm working on, just experimenting. And that Galkid resin just gets everywhere. I'm going to do the light source kind of dead center here, kind of just breaking the rules, but putting it in this fashion. Now just looking at it, you can wipe away, you can add back in, and this might be where a lot of pigment gets utilized, is kind of a back and forth motion. Just say, you know what, I don't like that, I don't like those strokes. Let me texturize it, let me change this sky. Let me slowly start building up the tones in the sky. And when you wipe, you're obviously removing water from the paper as well as pigment. But you can keep that wet effect, or that dry effect, sorry. Or you can come right back in with that brush, and now I have water back in that spot. So it's a very additive and subtractive process, and it allows you to kind of break loose from that feeling that once I put watercolor paint down, it has to stay in that spot. See, I'm just slapdashing this, not even thinking about it, and I could just come in and wipe it. And I could look for the effects that I want. And with practice, you can easily achieve those effects. It's been a few days since I watercolor painted. Like I said, it was before this hurricane. But one thing, be careful with the skies. Even though they're so random, you'll wind up doing something and then somebody will say, oh, I see a cat in the sky. And you'll be like, oh, come on. And then the only thing you could see is that cat from then on. Anywho, let's leave that sky the way it is. And let's now migrate back to this tree line. You can use this lifting technique to soften things up. Also, another person, since I was mentioning names before, very influential to my painting in the beginning, David Usher. He has a lot of free YouTube videos, and he has a Patreon account as well. He does watercolor oil, acrylic, I believe, and he probably does some knife paintings and stuff like that. Very nice gentleman. In fact, I don't know if I've seen him post lately. I have to look and check and see. Anyway, he does this kind of wiping back and forth, additive, subtractive painting approach. I know he does it with the oils. I don't know if he does it with watercolors. I don't recall seeing it there. And I'm letting its shapes take place. I'm building up the pigment load, and I'm kind of seeing a slope forming. At first it felt kind of marshy coming in, and now I'm seeing this form take place, and I'm kind of running with it. And I believe at the beginning I said it's a very good, let loose, relax, and paint technique. and it's fun. It's like right now, I think I'll change this curve right there. Like right now it's probably 10:30 down here. Yeah, it's exactly 10:30. You know, so it's later on this week. Work starts back up. So it's kind of just at that point at night where I'm just relaxing and creating a video. We had went back to work, then the storm hit before the kids could come to school, and now we go back Thursday for 2 days, Thursday, Friday. Then after Monday, Labor Day, the students arrived that Tuesday. They pushed it back due to, you know, the storm, and unfortunately, you know, like people in the region either not having, you know, power or an ability to get to the school itself, including teachers. But also the cleaning supplies that they ordered for COVID cleaning still haven't arrived. So if you look and see, you'll notice, you know, there's a lot of things that have been sold out recently. I mean, besides hand sanitizer and Lysol wipes being hard to find, you'll find that some technological devices, webcams and whatnot, are harder to find. People are using those for distance learning. The colleges are utilizing that quite a bit, I believe. You know, there's a lot of things that are starting to be affected, you know, supply and demand wise, due to our way of lives changing with COVID. So notice how there's been no dry off whatsoever, but here we're just building up pigment. One thing that needs to be iterated and reiterated and just non-stop is the fact that when you're painting wet and wet, you want to increase your pigment load as you go. This will prevent any sort of back runs or cauliflowering or anything like that. So you're going to want to be mindful of that. So think about it, I guess, essentially painting light to dark with the wet and wet. I haven't done too much lifting and whatnot. I feel like looking at it on the screen, it's coming across a little bit more on the green side. So let's sit back for a moment, take a look, see the direction we want to go in. I think what we need to do is now demonstrate the number 4 rigger. You can use the number 1 rigger. You can use a squirrel mop brush if your hands are stable enough for it. In fact, I bought one recently and I did a video on it. It was like $20 off of Amazon. It was the Paul Rubens number 6. It's fantastic. But for this application, I just don't have steady enough hands to get the thin line. Now here, you can play around with tree structures. The crazy thing is, and I mentioned before, originally I saw kind of a marshy effect taking place, and then I decided to go with the creek river water composition. Now we're going with the kind of pine trees, which we can dab in. You can use the hake brush for a textured effect. You can also utilize a, why can't I think of the name of the brush? You can use a fan brush. I'm left-handed. I'm just leaning my hand against the palette. You probably can hear it. Just dotting it on there. Do little reflections coming down. With reflections, you don't need to do the exact thing that you see. Just put the idea of it. Here's a great tool for y'all. This right here is a device used to pick up magnetic objects where you can't reach. For example, let's see if that's magnet over there. There we go. I can grab that like that. But what I use it for is what's called an artist's maul. I can rest my hand against it. You can use the hake brush if you want to lean it on something. You can use, somebody recommended a selfie stick. This guy's about, let's say, $6 to $10 off Amazon. And we went to the store, what was it called? Harbor Freight, which is kind of a cheap tool store. My fiance calls it Hobby Lobby for dads. So we were there, and I saw one of these for like, let's say $5, something like that. So it's a great device. Just be careful of any electronic devices around, mainly since it's magnetic. I don't know how it affects other magnetic things, but I don't want to find out. All right, now I'm going to bring this curve back here just to kind of bring that back, and we'll think about our next stage. Okay, now two things need to be pointed out. With these videos, I'm filming with my camera and I'm watching on the Kindle on the side, and the camera itself is deceptive. It'll come up darker than it usually really is. So I need to darken it up. Also, once we dry things off, with watercolor you have a color shift. Sorry, tonal shift where it lightens up. So we need to darken it up in that aspect as well. So that's why I have the blues and the Payne's gray there, but I'm just going to jump right into Payne's gray. And I'll feed it in to some spots. Now, since those areas are still wet, it's going to diffuse. The Payne's gray itself will dry as well. I find that Payne's gray spots don't photograph well. I'm not sure why. Doing horizontal motions here to kind of capture the top of the water. I want to see where I want to make the edge. Right in here. So horizontal strokes give you that horizontal plane for the top of the water. Using it for a textured effect, the hake. Once again, you can use a fan brush for that. You can also use the squirrel mop if you have it all kind of frayed at the end. Don't be afraid to take chancy moves. So right now we've just used our sap green, our Venetian red, and now we're feeding Payne's gray into these areas. And remember, you could use the paper towel to texturize and lift up. Just watch out for a repeated stamping effect. So you might want to shift the paper towel in your hand. And if you have something you don't like, you can cover it back up. If you want, you could take a card. Kind of skipping the line and let it go throughout. We do need an element back in here. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do, kind of do a little bit of, I guess, counter change. That's where we have light object over dark, and then once it gets over the light, I'll then make it dark. Now, one thing that needs to be said, this is 11 by 15 quarter sheet of Stonehenge aqua. My mat size, and the reason I do this is because a standard mat size is the opening 11 by 14. It's actually 10 5/8 by like 13 and 5/8, but just keep in mind that this will be cut off by a mat. Now remember, I'm doing this live on Twitch, so I put it on YouTube later on. So if I talk to somebody, it's because they came in the live chat, and somebody did. A Mr. or Mrs. Chase came in, and they said that it looks really good. Thank you, I appreciate that. This is just playing around right now. It's just 3 colors: sap green, Venetian red, and Payne's gray. And it's painted wet and wet. Kind of just an additive, subtractive, back and forth process. And it's just kind of a relaxing painting technique, pretty quick painting technique. I was working on some oils earlier. And here, like I said, we're looking at counter change. So it's a light, and it's going from a light to a dark, so I'm going to go over and create the dark right there. I might be kind of abusing this technique a little too much in this one, but it'll make it interesting. Like I said, it's 10:40 here, and I just want to kind of relax, but also kind of get a video out there. I haven't really put too many videos out this month, especially after the hurricane, because of the hurricane. So it's been a little weird. I'm just using the tip of the rigger just to create dots. In fact, in Chinese brush painting, I think they call this happy dots, and they actually have a brush for it. Do I have that brush? I have it somewhere. We're still wet and wet down here, so I'll just feed that in. Keep in mind that things are going to get lighter when this all dries off, so we just have to be wary of that. You can put more pigment down and keep on building things up. And because I'm so heavy-handed, I'm going to switch to a number 1 rigger. And I can do even lighter lines. This is a great opportunity to talk about tonal values within trees themselves. Whenever you're doing branches, if you do them lighter and grayer, they'll look like they recede into the paper. Do them nice and thin. And if you want something that's going to come out at us, put a thicker, darker line. And that will create a sense of depth in that spot. I'm using Payne's Gray with this, mainly because it's a convenience color on my palette. Boy, I think I grabbed a little ultramarine right there, just out of force of habit. Anyway, it's a convenience color on my palette, but it has such an extreme drying shift in it. So when I do a dry off, you'll see that here. In fact, let's take an overall look and see what's going on. We could, I don't know if I want to get too crazy with this one with trees and foreground and whatnot. So what I'll do now is do a dry off. So I'm going to use a blow dryer. So if you're listening with headphones, just take your headphones off. I don't want you to like blow your eardrums out. Now, here's the dry off. And watch for things lightening up. Okay, so hopefully you saw a little bit of that tonal shift as it dries. You feel it with the back of your hand. In some areas it's still a little cool. You don't really want the tonal shift, but you want to be prepared for it to know that it'll take place. What I'm going to do now is grab a little dish, and I'm going to wind up using Lunar Black. Or I might grab, we'll see what black I grab. And we'll do a foreground tree. We'll go for it. I just like using a separate dish for either black or white. Mainly because white will corrupt the paint on the palette. And everything will start getting chalky with it. Black really doesn't cause an issue, but I just don't really have a spot where I want to use it, and I'm only going to use a fine line, or the number 4. So this will be Lunar Black. Daniel Smith. Honestly, you could probably use any black that you want. You could stay with the Payne's Gray. You can mix darks with alizarin and like a green, a phthalo blue, and a quinacridone rose. Everybody always says you can mix the dark with ultramarine and burnt sienna. I have a really hard time achieving that for some reason. Let's see. So this is for kind of an extreme foreground tree. And in hindsight, knowing that the tree was going to be right here, when I was doing wet and wet, it would have been beneficial to put the shadow in beforehand, the reflection. But yeah, there's a lot of different blacks, a lot of different ways you can get a black that you want. There's lamp black, with like I think originally was kind of taken from literally like the carbon within a lantern. There's, is it ivory black or bone black, which was from the charred animal bones. Lunar black, which is what we're using right here. It has the pigment information on it, PBK 11, Mars black. Mars colors, I believe, are synthetic colors that were invented in the 17th century by chemists. So if you see something that says Mars red, Mars yellow, Mars orange, that's all synthetic. With the synthetic, you get the benefit of consistency from tube to tube. I believe that's the argument for synthetics. And with, you know, something that's harvested from the earth, obviously you're not going to have a consistency potentially to it. But there's kind of a romanticism, I think, with stuff that's harvested from the earth. For example, my oil painting palette has dirt from Italy, dirt from France, dirt from Georgia, and it's just something that I kind of enjoy. This is like I said, the kind of romanticism behind it. Me and the fiance, we had went to a flea market, kind of like one of those flea market strip mall type things, where it's just a whole bunch of different vendors within the one place. And you know, I was talking to the one of the vendors that was there setting up, you know, looking for art supplies, etc. And you know, I kept talking to him. I like vintage fountain pens and writing equipment. And in one of the hallways, he had another section, and he's like, and we're down in Louisiana. He's like, oh, this painting is made entirely from mud from Louisiana. If you look on the back, it tells you about all the paints and where they came from and all that. And I felt so bad because I think anybody would have been like, oh, you know, that's so cool, which it really is. It's really exciting. It's something that I would actually, you know, really want to do, is harvest my own pigments and, you know, do a painting from it, you know, using local dirt from the ground. But like having dirt from all over the world and using that, you know, I don't know. I hope I don't seem like a snob saying that. This was probably like the one person that wasn't enthralled by that. And yeah. Anyway, that's that one story. So with these guys, just play around, have fun. Literally just using the black and the concept of, since we're closer to the viewer, I'm just using a darker tonal value with it. That's all that's really happening here. When you do splits in the trees, make sure the splits don't happen side by side. See, I did that mistake right here. See, these ones are offset. The little crisscross X, you kind of want to avoid those. There's, you know, just little things to watch out for. Here I did a repetitive motion right there. Same hooking take place. So watch out for those guys. Sometimes with free form and just talking and not seeing the whole picture, you're going to make mistakes like that. The reason I point that out is in my painting journey, it started with Chinese brush painting. Well, I did oil painting and all that in college and sculpture and whatnot for fun, all those things. But I got back into paint, doing Chinese brush painting. And little things like that is, you know, stuff you want to be aware of. And then you can use hoity-toity words like cognizant. You want to be cognizant of the fact that you are incorporating those type of things. So, kind of referenced Chinese brush painting a few times this video. One day I'll have to, it's been 2 or 3 years since I did any of that. Maybe I'll try it out again. I think I still have the paper for it. The paper that's used for painting in the Asian culture and the Asian styles is definitely different than the paper that's used in the Western watercolors, which some of the paper is just absolutely beautiful. Like the effects that you get, it's just so weird how you'll have one where you can do a brush stroke and then another brush stroke over it, and you could see the overlap in depth. And that was with cheap Chinese brush paper. It was very cool. Painting the Chinese goldfish was a lot of fun. Just very simplistic ones. I wasn't that good at it. You know, like the people that can do the fantastic koi fishes. Wasn't like that. But I owe a lot of gratitude to the Chinese brush painting because it got me back into painting and it got me to teach myself watercolors. Anyway, enough rambling on my part. Let's do another dry off. We'll see how everything looks. Let me fix this camera a little bit. Sorry for that. Unfortunately, it has the cord attached to it. So if you have earbuds on, watch your ears. Now the last thing we'll do is kind of a massive tree. We'll demonstrate. A lot of these videos are just me demonstrating things, and I really encourage you guys, if you're watching live or at a later date on YouTube, excuse me, to ask questions, to make suggestions. If you guys want me to try something different, if you want me to say, hey, add white somewhere, and then we can try that out together. And I want these videos to be, you know, experimental and fun. Now, that guy's a little too watered down. Looks kind of ghostly. And the reason I'm doing this guy, first of all, for, you know, just the sake of the video, for you guys to see some differences. Sometimes in the live video, I give people the opportunity of, you know, do you want me to do this tree? Do you want me to do that tree? Do you want me to do what not? But anyway, here we have a thicker tree, and this is to kind of break up the left to right monotony, the symmetry that was taking place. A little bit of pun action there with the symmetry. I don't like how washed out this is. I'm going to have to feed in more. In fact, why don't we grab... Where did I put it? Grab the squirrel mop. Alright, so we got the squirrel mop. I'll play around with this guy. Just so anybody watching can see the differences. Now, one big thing of the fast and loose painting style, and if you're ever interested in this, I can recommend you other painters to watch, like Joe Menza, Stephen Cronin, Lois Davidson, David Usher, Alan Owen, all watercolorists, fantastic watercolor painters. Anyway, usually you want to maintain a limited amount of brushes so you're not all over the place. So far we've used the large hake to apply water, which you could use the medium hake for, it's just convenience. You can use what do we use? We use the rigger number 4 for trees and the foliage for that. We use the rigger number 1 in like 1 or 2 spots when I was talking about the steady hand for a thin line, and we discussed tonal values. And then here we have the squirrel mop just kind of feed in. Felt like the rigger was the hake was just holding a little too much water, and I wasn't really happy with what was happening there. This guy's casting a shadow, his reflection. So that's why we're going to bring that over. And his purpose was to break up the monotony from left to right and to kind of give a stopping point. And at this point in the painting we have a decent composition. We have interesting tonal values. We have spots for the eyes to rest. We talked about counter change. We have a lot taking place in, I'm going to guesstimate 40 minutes. So it's very easy. Also, if you don't have a hake brush, and we were doing texture before, see, right like that, you can use the squirrel mop for texture. You can get a lot done in a few minutes. It's very Bob Rossian, so to speak. So let's dry it off, sign it, we'll put a mat over it to see what it looks like, and we'll call it a day. So if you have earbuds, watch your ears. And like I said, of course, if you ever follow along with one of these tutorials, feel free to sign it with your own name, and feel free to go ahead and sell it. So I want you guys to have cash money for art supplies. Like I said, we know how expensive art supplies are. I would just love to see your results and to hear from y'all. By the way, I think I have linked my Instagram and whatnot, so definitely give me a follow on Instagram, and if you paint anything from these videos, post and tag. Love to see it. I'm gonna have to bust out a new mat. Last time I did a farmer's market, I must have bent it, but it's a good way for you guys to see what the finished product looks like and to see how everything kind of crops. Also lets you shift it around and see what you like. Anyway, on that note, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll talk to you all soon. I guess like, subscribe, follow, and have a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. Oh, I gotta turn it off. End.